في عام 1453 احتل الأتراك العثمانيون القسطنطينية عاصمة الإمبراطورية البيزنطية. جعل منها السلاطين العثمانيون مقر إمبراطوريتهم القوية، والتي امتدت في القرن السادس عشر من بودابست إلى بغداد، لتشمل مكة المكرمة وكل شمال إفريقيا. خلال هذا العصر الذهبي للعثمانيين كان زعيم الإمبراطورية المعمارية هو البناء البارع سنان. ما زالت أبنية سنان تهيمن على أفق العاصمة العثمانية السابقة المعروفة اليوم باسم إسطنبول.
We are looking at the silhouette of Istanbul, which was developing already through the Sultan's mosques that punctuated several hilltops. But Sinan gave it its monumental and final expression by adding particularly the Süleymaniye complex, which in its monumentality and complete extension all over the hilltop monumentalized the cityscape to an unprecedented degree.
Architects, of course, create buildings within the context of a site. But Sinan went beyond this, and he has demonstrated how a metropolis could be highlighted with these incredible monuments.
And we are also very lucky that he has lived long enough, like Frank Lloyd Wright, like Frank Gehry, and producing after the age of 70, 80, perhaps 90. And that is what architecture is. It matures in time, and Sinan has lived long enough to give us all these masterpieces.
Sinan also, in his late years, was called the Koca Mimar, the great architect. And he was like Michelangelo in a sense, who was called the divine. He was called not the divine, but Koca is also in a sense sublime, sublime.
This is the Süleymaniye Mosque, and of all the buildings built by Sinan in Istanbul, this is the most important and most monumental. It was commissioned by Sultan Süleyman, and Sinan himself is buried right next to it. We know that Sinan himself designed his tomb during his lifetime. Next to him is buried his only wife, from whom he had 2 daughters and 1 son. Sinan had a very long life. He was chief architect in the highest point of the Ottoman Empire over the reigns of 3 sultans, just about 50 years. There is, in fact, very little that we know about the person of Sinan, particularly his private personality. And there is only one portrait that depicts him. and what do we know about Sinan and where do we know about it? It is a unique document, and that is the autobiography that he commissioned to his poet-painter friend Mustafa Sai, maybe a couple of years before his death. So this is the only reliable source that we have about Sinan in terms of his biography and some clues about what he thought about himself, namely that creativity and being a great artist of world renown was one of his primary concerns in life. And in fact, he says that some of the great works that he described, he created so that they would be global works that would attract people of the world and be appreciated by them. We are now going to look at one of the rare copies of this autobiography which Sinan dictated to Sai. The reason for writing this beautiful book is that one day our felicitous Sultan's chief architect Sinan, having become a frail old man, desired me to record his conversations in prose and verse in order to leave his fame and reputation on the pages of time, so that he may be remembered with well-wishing prayers. It seems that what we are looking at is a rare draft, because you can see that it is filled with scribbles and corrections. This represents a close editing process in which Sinan himself corrected the lists of monuments that were provided as an appendix to his autobiography, which gives his life story, and the list gives all the monuments he claimed to be his own.
This servant of the ruler of the age and of the viziers and grandees designed and built noble Friday mosques in 80 places, more than 400 exalted mosques, Quran schools in 60 places, 32 palaces, 19 tombs, 17 hospices, 3 hospitals, and bridges were built in 7 places, aqueducts in 15 places, 6 warehouses, 19 caravanserai, 33 baths.
لم تنج جميع المباني التي بنيت في عهد سنان، لكن العديد من مساجده لا زالت قائمة ويتم استخدامها رغم اختلاط السياح في الوقت الحالي بروادها المسلمين. بنى سنان عدة قصور، وبقي منها جناح السلطان مراد الثالث الموجود داخل قصر الباب العالي. يغطي جدران غرفة نوم السلطان بلاط إزنك المزخرف، ولا تزال الرسوم الجصية الأصلية تزين السقف. بنى سنان نافورة للسلطان تحت الغرفة، تتضمن الأضرحة العديدة التي بناها سنان ضريح السلطان سليمان الذي تمت زخرفة بنيته مثمنة الأضلاع ببذخ. وكانت قبة الضريح البناء الأصلي الآخر الذي ما زال موجوداً. البناء الوحيد الذي حمل توقيع سنان هو جسر السلطان سليمان. طلب بعض أصحاب المقام الرفيع من سنان بناء مساجد لهم كهذا الذي تبرع به الوزير الأعلى رستم باشا. كان يسمح للمساجد التي يتبرع بها أصحاب المقام الرفيع بأن تكون لها مئذنة واحدة، كما يجب أن تكون أصغر حجما وفي مواقع أقل شهرة من تلك المساجد التي تتبرع بها العائلة الإمبراطورية. أظهر هذا الوزير الأعلى قوته بإنفاقه ثروة كبيرة على التصميم الداخلي لمسجده. كانت بعض المساجد الصغيرة التي بناها سنان عبارة عن جواهر معمارية، لكن كانت مساجد الجمعة الإمبراطورية الثلاثة هي الأهم.
Ve gençken, Yeniçeri askeriyken bir sürü savaşa katılıyor. Yani Güney İtalya'ya kadar gidiyor, Irak'a kadar gidiyor, İran yakınlarına kadar gidiyor, Avrupa'yı görüyor. O gördüklerini çok iyi sentez yapıyor. Marangozluktan gelerek birdenbire güzel bir başarı göstermiş oluyor. En büyük başarısı da
This is Sinan's first imperial commission, Şehzade, which was maybe the third building of Sinan, but his first mature building. It was commissioned, of course, by the great Sultan Süleyman the Magnificent, and it had to be a large mosque. Being an imperial mosque, it had to be a large mosque. No vizier or nobody could have the same size dome as the Sultan. One of the aesthetic forms of Ottoman architecture is these constant contrasts with the square as against the circle, the cube as against the sphere. This is a system where the world of man, with its four directions, north, east, south, west, is placed in the universe, in the world of the heavens, which is a circular, non-ending, infinite system.
Sanatçı burada bir yorum getirmiş oluyor. Yine yukarıya gözümüzü doğru kaydırıyoruz. Kemerlerin yanında surların arka su çörtenlerini, su olduklarında da
the whole space conception in a mosque and the way Sinan and other Ottoman architects developed their interiors by using maybe the same structural solutions of the Byzantines created a very different space conception. For one thing, the light that is coming from many windows and from many different levels is very important. Even at the very lowest level, where people are praying, you see there's an opening to the exterior, and the windows are larger as they come down to the lower levels of the building. The relationship to the mosque is very physical. You go there without shoes, you touch your head down on the floor, there is the sound of the muezzin. That sound is very important also. And in Sinan's buildings, the quality of sound, the absorbance of sound by these round forms was also very consciously conditioned.
Latéral. Donc c'est ça qui est bien réussi. Le dérangement, mais c'est juste grâce aux amphores qu'il avait placés, soit dans les murs, soit entre les deux parois de la coupole principale. Et donc il a placé des amphores, et c'est grâce à ces amphores qu'il y a une acoustique extraordinaire. Tout à l'heure, je vais vous faire une démonstration. Je vais aller jusqu'au mihrab.
It took me nearly 10 years before I photographed the architecture of Sinan, because to understand the architectural quality of the monuments in Istanbul, it took me that time. And then I was ready to read his architecture, because you must really study his architecture and you must know the difference between the other buildings in the city, because they all look very similar to each other. When I photograph his buildings, I try to look through his eyes. I position myself in a place where he was looking at his building or where he was thinking about the volumetric features. I always search for these positions with my camera.
Janissaries were a unique military corps, an elite corps in the service of the Sultan. They were essentially Christian children who were recruited at a very young age, and they were converted into Islam, they were trained, and their training schools, their training period was a very important part of their professional life.
اشتهر سنان ابن عبد المنان بلقب رئيس المعماريين المتواضع. أتى إلى اسطنبول مع المجندين الذين قدموا من كرمان ومن بعض المناطق اليونانية.
Sinan was recruited from the area around Kayseri, which is in the middle of Cappadocia. He came from a village called Arnas. He was definitely a Karamani Greek, an Anatolian Greek.
Tabii o bizim gururumuz. Değil Türkiye, dünya çapında gururumuz bizim. Biz onunla her zaman övünürüz. O bizim mimarımız diyelim. Şimdi Mimar Sinan burada 3 kardeşimiz. Kardeşinin biri Mimar Sinan buraya yapmış. Karagoz adında kardeşi Karagoz Çeşme'ye yapmış. Ağa adına kardeşi de Ağa Çeşmesi'ni yapmış. Bunlar ayrı ayrı. Yukarıda onlar. Sonra şu aşağıda doğduğu ev var. Yetiştiği ev var.
زعم أن هناك منزلا في بلدة أرناس عاش فيه سنان، لكن لا يوجد دليل قاطع على ذلك، وبالتأكيد كان الطابق العلوي قد أضيف إلى المبنى في وقت لاحق.
There would be a recruiting officer and a janissary captain going around town from town, and the families would bring the children. The most good-looking, the most energetic, physically very able and very talented ones would be selected. And families were essentially very much trying to convince the recruiting officer that their son should be taken in, because it was a chance for them to go up in the ranks of the Ottoman administrative system. And the child could even end up as the Grand Vizier.
This humble person became a recruit in the rose garden of the reign of Sultan Selim, being like a measuring rule, straight in character among the novices. I was eager and aspired to the carpenter's trade.
He was definitely not very young, and therefore he didn't become an Acemi Oğlan or a cadet in the top school of the Janissaries, which is Enderun, which is inside the third court of Topkapı Palace. He was actually sent to the second level of school, where other type of officers were trained, such as the military engineers, which is here in this space, Ibrahim Pasha Palace. We know that he built a lot of military structures. He was a very prolific bridge builder, and he was also looking at all the different types of architecture in Asia and in Europe when he traveled extensively with the Janissary force. And in 1538, he was finally appointed as the chief royal architect. Now, that appointment happened because Sinan was able to show his capabilities as a very talented architect and military engineer during all the campaigns that he attended with the sultans.
I set out on the Moldavia campaign, and returning from there with good fortune, the office of Chief Imperial Architect was committed to my charge. It was true that the thought of abandoning my career as a janissary gave me pain, but in the end I accepted. Thus, I was able to serve many sultans of the Ottoman state and build their many great paradise-like mosques.
I have also published a very interesting facsimile about Sultan Süleyman writing to the Süleymaniye Mosque. Probably it was made by the artist Melchior Lorex, and probably this is one of the very earliest documentation of the Ottoman elite done in Western style. You can see all different features of the viziers. And it was only during these grand ceremonies, Friday prayers, they were leaving the palace and going in this full procession to the mosque. This is, of course, more special because it is really the opening of the Süleyman's Mosque. And I'm sure Sinan was waiting at the gate of the Süleymaniye Mosque, the arrival of this amazing crowd.
Al deze bijgebouwen horen bij de moskee. Dit is een bibliotheek. U kunt dat lezen. Süleymaniye Kütüphanesi. Kitab is in het Arabisch boek. Kütüp is meervoud. Bibliotheek. Links en rechts deze deel. Een bibliotheek uit de 16e eeuw. Van Sinan dus. En dan gaat u de straat naar rechts om. Ziet u, koepels, komt geen einde aan. Het blijven koepels gewoon. Allemaal bijgebouwen. De gaarkeuken.
بوجود كلية طب ومستشفى وغرف النزلاء ومطابخ عامة ومدارس دينية، كان مجمع السليمانية يعتبر المركز الروحي والفكري للإمبراطورية العثمانية. كان الموضوع الأساسي لفن سنان المعماري خلال حياته محاولة توفير مساحة داخلية مثالية تحت قباب المساجد التي يبنيها.
The dome was always an important symbolic form in architecture, a very important signifier of power and wealth and also holiness throughout the Mediterranean countries. The Pantheon in Rome and Hagia Sophia in Constantinople being the high points of Roman and Byzantine architecture. And in fact, from the Dome of the Rock onwards, the dome was an important form in Islamic architecture, both in religious architecture and in palace architecture. So what we see in the Ottoman Empire is definitely a continuation of that. So this was, I think, a parallel to what is happening in Italy at that time with the Renaissance, because building monumental domes and surpassing the ancients became an ideal in both cultures.
Suleiman the Magnificent's imperial mosque was commissioned to Sinan when Suleiman was returning from signing a treaty with Charles V, where he is stated as the greatest worldly power, higher than Charles V. So he felt compelled to order a mosque, a monument to himself, that would show his dominion over both the Christian and the Islamic world.
Hagia Sophia was a big school. It was there, you know. And there was a period, hundreds of years, nothing better than that was done in the world, in the whole universe. And Sinan took it from that point of view and studied it and learned it so well. And when you look at the plan of this one, it's very similar, you know. It is a sort of longish basilican plan, and the sides are left open for fenestration and light. And exactly like single domes in Hagia Sophia, there are double domes here. So he has inherited all these things and learned as an engineer, as an architect, as a man of production of buildings.
This is in principle very close to Hagia Sophia. As we see in experience, the space is totally different. And although the Ottoman architects and Sinan used certain elements that they got directly from Byzantine architecture, they used it in a way that was suitable or that brought up the architectural paradigms of Ottoman culture, creating a homogeneous space. There is no separation between the central space and the side extensions of space, although we see these two huge porphyry columns on both sides. The eye passes them and goes all the way directly towards the wall. So the whole width of the space is integrated into the totality.
Hij heeft aan alles gedacht. Kijk naar die brievenbussen daar bovenaan. Die twee openings in de muur, boven die poort, links en rechts. Ziet u, lijkt wat brievenbussen.
Oh ja. De condens.
Precies, ja. Een bijzondere circulatie in de moskee gebracht. Alle walm van de lampen hier, olielampen geweest natuurlijk, die mogen ook niet naar alle kanten op. Dat maakt ook snel vies. Alles ging direct naar boven. Daar binnen, daarachter is een kamer. Wat wij inktkamer ook noemen. Alles werd daarin verzameld. En zelfs dat afval werd niet weggegooid, in inktindustrie gebruikt, inkt van gemaakt. Dus.
The domes are covered with lead, which was a very precious material and therefore a status sign. It could only be used in the highest level monuments, the others having to resort to just regular brick. Sinan on purpose varied the sizes of the domes, alternating larger and smaller domes, and created a pyramidal silhouette that became a signature of his style. Now the buttresses tend to be in other buildings very angular and jut out, and Sinan solved this awkwardness by creating a stepped layering that further accentuated the pyramidal rippling of the domes. It looks less massive and more elegant, and in fact it directly connects with what Sinan said was his chief aesthetic ambition, namely to combine engineering strength with aesthetic elegance and refinement.
At the same time that Sinan was busy with the Süleymaniye Mosque and its dependencies, he was also restoring the Byzantine water pipes coming from the Black Sea area and constructing aqueducts to bring water to Istanbul. And the first drop symbolically dropped into the reservoir in the center of the Süleymaniye court here.
And when this humble servant arrived in the Sultan's presence, filled with joy on account of the water, the Agas demanded why this water was not fragrant. "This is stale water," they said. I prayed and answered, "It is known to my felicitous Sultan that we did not bring this water through pipes. This water is from an open stream, which we made to flow through masonry channels. It is a crystal clear source, free from impurity." Immediately I was distinguished with gifts and robes of honor.
Given the location of the Süleymaniye on top of a hill, Sinan built underground structures on which this terrace was created. As an esplanade, it opens a view onto the world. This was an important aspect of the symbolism of the site, to command a view of the world, of the city, of the capital being at the confluence of the Mediterranean and the Black Seas, and at the intersection of Europe and Asia. The two continents come together at this spot.
This is Melchior Lorik's panorama of Istanbul, and we have published this as a facsimile. The original document has been made in 1559, and it's been preserved at the Leiden University. And it is one of the most important panoramic drawings of Istanbul, and it is about 12 meters in length. We have produced this exactly the same size as the original. It shows us the full panoramic length of the Topkapı Palace, the Hagia Sophia, and then this incredible marine traffic which is existing on the Golden Horn. Here we come to the most interesting part of the drawing, which is related to Süleymaniye, and Melchior Lorik is himself drawn here together with architect Sinan. This was an assumption by myself that it could be Sinan because Lorik is invited to make the drawing of Sultan in procession to the opening of the Süleyman's Mosque, and probably Sultan has introduced the architect of the monument to Melchior Lorik. So probably Sinan has guided Lorik where the city could be best viewed for his panorama. We also can see the house of Sinan right in front of Süleyman's mosque. It's a U-shaped Ottoman house, quite large in scale. It's about where his grave is positioned now.
تتضمن مكتبة السليمانية القديمة مجموعة كبيرة من المخطوطات، وهي الآن عبارة عن مكتبة عامة.
Unlike the versions we saw in the palace archive, which were drafts and unicum copies, these are 17th and 18th century manuscripts which played a big role in perpetuating Sinan's fame. No single biography or autobiography had ever been dedicated to an architect. It is also very rare in European history, one should think. So this is not only a feature of Islamic history, but of medieval history in general. Biographies begin to appear in the Renaissance, and I think this is interesting because just around that time is when we have Sinan's biography.
With Renaissance, we suddenly discovered signature, and Sinan was a signature. He's a signature architect, his name was known, he wrote his autobiography, and he gave a full account of what he has accomplished, and he also declared his successes and failures and what his aspirations. So I would say that he is like Leonardo da Vinci or Alberti, Leon Battista Alberti, or like Michelangelo. He is a signature man. And in Islamic world, I think he is the most outstanding signature architect.
Because Sultan Selim had the highest affection and esteem for the city of Edirne, he gave an imperial command that a Friday mosque be built, the like of which had never been built before. And one reason the people of the world said such a construction was beyond human capability was that no dome as large as that of the Hagia Sophia had ever been built in the lands of Islam.
Right after he had completed the Süleymaniye, he said he heard that the so-called architects of the infidels, namely the European architects, the Renaissance architects, who were his contemporaries, had made the comment and assumption that Hagia Sophia's dome size had never been surpassed.
Thus, those who passed for architects among the sinning unbelievers used to say, "We have scored a victory over the Muslims. The construction of a dome such as this is very difficult. Were it possible to build one like it, the Muslims would have done it." Their statements, in accord with their perversely forced views, pained and endured in the heart of this humble servant.
So he then decides to outdo Hagia Sophia. I think it is at that point that a big rivalry appears, and in what he regarded as his latest work and his masterpiece in the Selimiye, the main point of competition becomes the size of the dome.
I exerted myself and, with the help of God, showed my capabilities and made this exalted dome to exceed that of the Hagia Sophia by 6 cubits in height and by 4 cubits in circumference.
ربما تكون هذه مبالغة من قبل الشاعر ساي الذي يجامل صديقه، ورغم أن سنان اقترب كثيرا إلا أنه في الواقع لم يتفوق على حجم قبة كنيسة آيا صوفيا، لكن من ناحية معمارية قدم سنان تحفة فنية من خلال جامع السليمية الذي اعتبره العديدون ذروة فن بناء القباب.
Selimiye was built for the son of Süleyman the Magnificent, Selim II, when he won a victory and took the island of Cyprus, and all the income from Cyprus was dedicated to the building of this mosque, which is very special. Selimiye is unique in the sense that Sinan has brought to its maximum potential and evolution the centralized dome scheme. Although the dome is supported by 8 piers, these 8 piers are pushed extremely to the sides of the space, and at the lower part we feel that we are in a square. It is as though the whole space is carved out of one single rock.
In architecture, there are 2 basic components. One is the structure, the other one is the light. So when light and structure come together, they compose the space. And space is the final product, especially in pious spaces like mosques and places like that. The quality of space is the most aspiring, most important, and most significant aspect of it.
When we enter the Selimiye Mosque, suddenly we feel that we are under the dome of heaven.
Its exalted dome is like the highest heaven, like a model of the 9 skies. A dome like this never has been, nor ever will be built.
Sinan got rid of the idea he had been developing in the Şehzade and the Süleymaniye of the pyramidal cascade of half domes and smaller domes. The result was that because the smaller domes didn't come down to the lower level, the height of the walls was increased, and therefore much more detailed facade compositions could be undertaken. Usually this Muezzin's gallery is always attached to one of the piers. Here it is smack in the middle of the mosque, right under the dome, and we have underneath very curious fountain, and the fountain is an octagon in a square, almost echoing the plan of the mosque. The motifs combine elements of medieval Islamic art with Ottoman motifs, among which we also see Turco-Mongol elements, such as here the Chinese cloud bands, as well as lotuses and peonies that go back to the Turco-Mongol period when these elements were introduced into Islamic art in the 14th century. And these were continued and updated with new floral motifs that we find spectacular examples of in the tiles that are in the Sultan's gallery.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
What is so fantastic about all of Sinan's work is that it is still being used today. It is being used in the same way that it was being used, or sometimes for slightly different functions, but they live in a way that they contribute still very essentially to the city and to the historic and living sense of the cities in which they are placed. This is an extremely important fact because I don't think today's architecture will live in the same way.
كان سنان يأمل أن تذكر مبانيه في صفحات الزمن، وقد نجح من تلك الناحية بكل تأكيد. وبعد مرور 450 عاما ما زالت مبانيه مثيرة للاهتمام كما كانت من قبل، وما زال المؤمنون يحتشدون في مساجده ذات القباب كل يوم. إنه إرث سيفخر به سنان لو كان حيا اليوم.